Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and it's full review time on this bad boy. This is my Eutsler DUK, and I've had this knife for a while now. This review is long overdue. I've actually been carrying this knife today, so there's some tape residue on it. But I got this knife at California Custom Knife Show, and yeah, that has to be, 2 months ago at least now? Goodness. So I've had it for a little while. I've carried it a whole bunch. I've used it quite a bit. Nothing super hard. Like I haven't been, breaking through cinder blocks with this knife or anything, but all of my typical EDC stuff, we'll talk about that. And I've gotten a really, really good feel for this knife. It feels like it's mine because I've had it for long enough and carried it enough times and just enjoyed it enough that it really does feel like it's my knife now at this point. So yeah, this is made by Cody Eutsler. I will say again, I was saying his name wrong for a long time. I don't know if I ever said it on video or whatever, but before meeting him at California Custom Knife Show, I always read it. I even jumbled up the letters in my head. I was saying Eutsler, E-U-S-T-L-E-R, but it's Eutsler, E-U-T-S-L-E-R. This knife originally, I think, was kind of referred to as the Duke because it's just D-U-K, daily utility knife. But now there's the Duckling, which is a smaller version of this knife. And so I think it's kind of, the name is almost transitioned to be just accepted as being the Duck because it wouldn't make sense for there to be a Duke and a Duckling. It makes more sense for it to be a Duck and a Duckling, the big and small version of the same knife. Anyway, this one in particular has a CPM 20 CV blade. We have titanium handle scales, zirconium pivot collar, zirconium back spacer, if that would focus, zirconium clip, and zirconium pivot collar on this side as well, zirconium studs. So a lot of zirconium bits, which to me is a very happy medium of having some nice materials on here, nicer than the titanium or whatever they would default to, but also not looking too crazy. I prefer that this knife is subdued in its looks. So yeah, material construction, it's pretty simple in that way. Titanium, zirconium, 20 CV. We do have a hardened insert, and that's kind of it on construction. Really nice hardware throughout, and I guess that's kind of it. So this is what I often see now that I'm kind of in the Facebook group, referred to as a 3-slot duck because it's got these 3 slots on the handle scales on both sides. It does have this external milling kind of pattern on it, which adds a little bit of grip too. Hopefully you can see that. And really a cool, like this is my ultimate spec, I think. And I'm lucky that I was able to get it at California Custom Knife Show. I had entered lottos on his Instagram for a while, hoping to get one, never got picked. And so the fact that I was able to make the stars align at California Custom Knife Show and pick this up was pretty special. I've also noticed, so I think when I did my unboxing and my first impressions of this knife, at the time I was a little bit critical of the fact that on the Ducklings, he was in the midst of still using, I think it was CPM 154, which is okay. It's fine steel, but it wasn't exciting. He has since, in the last couple of weeks, started cranking out Ducklings in Magna Cut. So I think what was happening is he still had some of that old steel on hand. He was finishing up using it, and now he's on to Magna Cut for the Ducklings, which is really, really exciting. This one, being in 20 CV on a duck, is also awesome. I really, really like 20 CV, especially when it's done well. But if he is using Magna Cut, that's going to be exciting to a lot of people. So I'm curious to see if Magna Cut is going to be the blade steel he uses on both models moving forward, or if it's just on the Duckling, or we'll see. But that's exciting news in the world of Eutsler knives. Anyway, so let's talk about where I've kind of landed on this knife, because I did a first impressions where I talked about how I was feeling about this knife. It turned out to be a little bit of a roast of the Sebenza. That tends to happen with me. I'm not a big fan of the Chris Reeve Sebenza. Personally, it's not a knife that works exceptionally well for me, and I have a little bit of resentment for the way that so many people talk about them as if they're the pinnacle knife in today's world. This to me is, for a thumb stud titanium frame lock, about perfect. This is pretty much what I want out of a knife like this, and it has a lot of similarities to the Sebenza. So that's kind of why that video went that way, right? But I'm going to try to not go down into that rabbit hole too much. Suffice it to say, I still feel very strongly that this, for me, is kind of the knife in that category. If you want to lump those into a category, thumb stud, fairly simple looking frame locks. That's an oversimplification of what this knife is, and frankly what the Sebenza is. But this is on bearings, that's on washers. There's other knives also in this category, but for me, if you want to kind of define a knife by some of those simple things, the Duck is as perfect as I've found for me. So let's just talk quickly ergos, carry, cutting, all that fun stuff, and action. Ergonomically, this knife for my hand is just wonderful. It's not like the most comfortable knife I've ever felt in my life, but it fits my hand really well. This kind of forward groove fits my pointer finger really well. The rest of my fingers land very comfortably and naturally. It's a fairly neutral handle shape without being like, it's still got some shape to it. It's not just a rectangle, right? But we've got a gentle slope back here. We've got a curve in here. It kind of transitions to a flat. It's a nice handle profile that for my hand locks in well. We do have a tiny bit of a ramp here where the blade comes up. It's not an aggressive ramp. It's not like a PM2 or a Para 3, but it does ramp up just enough. There is zero jimping on that spot. I freaking love that there's no jimping on this knife. No jimping there, so nice and smooth, good flat spot for my thumb to rest. In a saber grip, this knife is just money for me. Really, really comfortable in that way. Also in a hammer grip, super comfortable. Draw cut, even that is comfortable. It's not poking or prodding me in any inconvenient way. Reverse grip, super comfortable. I love that. And reverse grip draw cut, also comfortable. So this handle is neutral enough that any orientation I put it into my hand, it's comfortable enough to make some cuts. But it's also shaped enough that in a saber grip, it feels very locked in and indexed. So I love that about it. Let's talk action next. So this knife is on bearings. And obviously, as you can see, it is thumb stud only for deployment. These thumb studs, however, middle finger flick like a freaking dream. It's nice and smooth. Not like guillotine drop shutty, but almost. And it's kind of nice that it has this like controlled resistance the whole way down, but it's not like a washer knife or an overly tight knife where you're having to like really coax it shut. It still wants to close kind of under its own weight, but it just needs like the slightest little bit of a tap, if you will. I just did that weird. But yeah, with the thumb studs, it's very poppy with the thumb, and it's totally doable to middle finger flick, and in fact it's enjoyable in that way. So as much as I have stickers and shirts and all these things that say holes over studs, and I stand by that, I prefer holes to studs, if you know what I mean. This is a case where thumb studs are done really well and they're applied well here. So it's not that I dislike thumb studs, it's just that I prefer holes in general. But as thumb stud knives go, this has got to be probably my favorite ever. It's just really well done. The thumb studs are positioned perfectly, and it's just kind of a joy to use them here. So the action is great. I love it. I don't think I'd change anything about it, if I'm being honest. Next, let's talk carry. So this is one place where I'll give a little critique of the knife. It's going to be one of very few. This pocket clip, this one in particular, is done in zirconium. On every Duck that I've seen, it's the same shape pocket clip. This one just happens to be Zirc. I like the finishing on the clip. I haven't had problems with retention or anything like that, but it is a little bit pokey here, and it's not even so much that in hand it's poking me, because where it lands in my hand, it's not bothering me. But I've noticed that on several of my shirts, when this has just been in my front right pocket, because of the way it kind of sticks up just enough, and because it's enough of a point there, it has caught on a few of my shirts, and on two separate shirts, two separate occasions, it has even like started pulling some of the threads out of like the bottom rim of the shirt where it's sewn shut or whatever. Like it started pulling threads out of two of my shirts just from like getting it out of the car, whatever, not like doing anything that would normally snag on a pocket clip. I've snagged my own clothing multiple times, so I don't love that about it. And to the touch, it's a little bit pointier than I would prefer. So I think that just being more rounded, kind of chopping just a couple millimeters off of the tip of that clip there would help it a lot. So a relatively minor thing. Now that I'm aware of it, if I'm getting out of the car and this knife is in my pocket and I'm wearing a shirt that's long enough to potentially get to it, I just make sure it doesn't happen. But in a perfect world, I'd just carry it and not think about it like I do with every other one of my knives that I carry regularly. So anyway, there's that little thing. But other than that, carry-wise, the profile of this knife, super comfortable to carry. There's no flipper tab sticking out. It's pretty narrow in this direction, like across this way. It's not super thick. It is a little bit on the heavier side because these scales aren't internally milled or anything. So I've definitely felt titanium frame locks that are in this size category that are lighter, but it doesn't feel like overly heavy either. And in pocket, because everything is nice and contoured and rounded and smooth and in such a way, it's not uncomfortable. It's not even like, it's never been annoying to carry. I'm not like, oh, that knife is a little too heavy. It just isn't particularly light either, if that makes sense. But yeah, in and out of pocket, it's good. Got plenty of retention with the clip. It carries not deep, but there's not a ton of knife sticking out of pocket either. It's kind of about that much. So not a huge profile sticking out of pocket. I would prefer it, if I'm being honest, if it was a loop over style deep carry clip. Functionally, I definitely prefer that. This does feel dressed up because it has a nice milled zirconium clip on it, but I'm more of a function over form guy, especially with pocket clips, I guess. So yeah, the pocket clip isn't my favorite thing, but in spite of that, it still carries very well, and it's not keeping me from putting it in pocket. It's not precluding me from wanting to carry this knife. Carry this knife a lot. I really, really like it. So then that leaves us with the last category would be cutting, right? We talked ergos, action, and carry. Okay, so cutting performance. This blade is done really, really well. It's one of those blade shapes, just kind of a simple drop point type of shape that is predictable and easy to use. It cuts like a knife does. There's not something funky happening here. There's no weirdness to it. It just feels, especially in a saber grip, which is how I typically use this knife and use most knives in my daily cutting tasks. It just feels really predictable in a nice way. It's not super thin behind the edge, but it's not overly thick either. It's just a flat grind with a fairly thick-ish stock, but not overly thick. It's not like an overbuilt style knife. It's just a predictable blade, if that makes sense. Like, I don't find that the blade is even really like a big talking point of this knife, but it's no slouch. It hasn't failed me at any cutting task. The tip is precise enough that when I've needed to do precise little things, I can get into tight little places and I can do that. The edge that's on it is fantastic. It has held it very well. This knife has been through a bunch of cardboard at this point. It's opened a ton of boxes. It has cut zip ties. It has cut little rubber bands. I've cut, I think, 2 or maybe even 3 apples with it up to this point. It's been a knife that I've put in my primary pocket, front right pocket, and I've used for anything that has come up. And this being like $1,000 knife, that's to some people maybe kind of crazy, but it's a nice user finish. The blade just seems to be a user blade to me. This isn't mirror polished or hand rubbed or anything. You can't tell that I've used this for anything. The factory edge is still going strong. I haven't noticed any deformations. It's a joy and a pleasure to use this knife. And the blade is just a solid, good blade. It's not like, wow, this is the sliciest thing I've ever encountered. But it's also not overly thick. It's not problematic. It cuts very, very well. And the edge that he put on as this knife came new, it's a really, really good edge too. So that helps its case for sure. But yeah, so ergos, great. Carry, pretty good. Cutting, pretty good. Action, great. So it's like, this is a really, really nice knife. I'm liking it a ton. It sits at the top of my collection, being how much it cost, what it's made of, how much I enjoy carrying it and using it. It has quickly become one of my favorite knives. And to have a knife with thumb studs, that's just a fairly simple frame lock, be that exciting to me and that pleasurable to carry and use, I should say pleasant. Is pleasurable the right word to use there? It sounded wrong as I said it. I don't know. I've been very pleasantly surprised with how much I've enjoyed it. I looked forward to owning one of these for a long time. It was kind of a grail in the sense that it was one I was chasing. They were hard to get. I was lucky to finally actually get one. And so for it to, in application, actually be as good as I hoped it would be, and maybe even a little bit better, is really, really nice, because I had lofty expectations for this knife. Everyone I know who's spoken of them has said such great things that it was like on this pedestal, and to get it and have it actually work that well is a great thing. So I guess that's kind of it. Full review wise, I just love this knife. I think they're worth what they cost if you can get one at table or close to it. It's the fit and finish is exceptional. The functionality of it is really, really, really great. I see a lot of knives kind of in this upper echelon that are much less user-friendly in their finishes or in the materials that they use, or something about them just makes them seem a little bit less approachable as a pocketable, usable knife. And I think the Duck is kind of a wonderful example of a knife that can be in this range and still be user-focused. And that's important to me. So anyway, I love it. I think it's great. And I guess that'll be it for my full review. So thanks for checking it out. I'll see you guys on the next one.